Jazz Jennings is an example of affirmative care. Jazz was born a boy but raised as a girl since the age of 5. He was treated hormonally since age 11. Last year, at the age of 17, Jazz had surgery to remove his penis and create a simulated vagina out of his stomach lining. After surgery, Jazz's wounds began separating and a blood blister began to form. An emergency surgery was performed. According to Jazz's doctor, as I was getting her on the bed, I heard something go pop. When I looked, the whole thing had split open. This is a medical experiment on a child that has been playing out on television for the past 12 years.
Nope, not gonna touch it. Nope, I'm done. I am totally done. Not gonna talk about it, because there's some things I'm gonna talk about, and that's not gonna be one of them. So hello world, my name is Amelia, and as you can see, this is not something I really want to talk about right now. But it is just something that keeps coming in my face. Thank you, YouTube, to just keep constantly recommending these videos. One of the reasons I had to do some of my research in anonymous incognito mode because, I don't want to be screwing up my recommendations all the more. So anyways, for any of you who are actually lost in the infosphere of what I'm talking about, I want to talk about how messed up transgenderism is in our current day society. So as many of you can guess, because I'm transgender myself, I obviously must be okay with it. And to be perfectly honest, yeah, sort of. I don't believe it's for everybody. I think there are certain people that should be, really do need affirming care, who do need some sort of transgender care from the doctor. However, there is a lot of us who are a part of a social experiment. That's really honestly what it is. We live in a day and an age where transgenderism is a social experiment, and it's dangerous, and I totally, absolutely, 100% agree that we should not be doing it. So you probably can guess based on a previous video I did where I was talking about what I do not like about the LGBT community. And one of the things I talked about was basically, if I can remember correctly, I basically had mentioned how it is so free of just everybody should be allowed to transition. Doesn't matter if you're 5, 10, 15, or 90, you should be allowed to transition. And the honest truth of that is no. I do not believe that to be the case. And what's even really more interesting is the further and further I get into my own transition, the more that I actually believe that not everybody should be allowed to transition. It is that's what I actually like. Some rare people that are middle of the road. I do actually believe in there being some level of gatekeeping kept to affirmative care. I do not believe that everybody should just be allowed to walk in, sign a paper, and do it, even though I'm probably being extremely hypocritical considering the fact that I actually started on informed consent. However, I also do not believe that we should have miles and miles and miles of red tape where somebody waits years and years and years to finally get their affirmative care. The example that I can make is I've actually watched a lot of Blair White's videos on YouTube, and unsurprisingly to myself, I actually agree with quite a few things she says. I mean, there's a few things that she has said that I'm just kind of like, okay, yeah, sure. And it mostly comes in the fact that I do believe there are some things that she needs to be more careful about, but that's beside the fact. This video has nothing to do with her. Point is, there was a story she told in a video I was watching where she was talking about the trans clinic that she actually goes to. The receptionist is a trans woman herself, and she told her how that Blair walking in was a breath of fresh air because everyone else who walked into the clinic was not really trans. And when I heard that story, I 100% understood and agreed with what she said. Because me personally, I have met a lot of trans people in the community who are not really trans. And I've been telling a couple of people about this lately, my opinions of it, is I have met a lot of trans people who seem to have bitterness built up, like problems, that personality flaws that you kind of pick up on, and you're just kind of like, have you talked to a therapist about this? And usually when you start digging more into it, they'll start telling you about how it's like, oh yeah, I haven't talked to my therapist about it. And you're like, I think that's something that should be dealt with. I do believe that there needs to be a level of again, gatekeeping that does. Now, I will, however, say that it's the fact that we need to just kind of work out a program. Somebody needs to come up with the best possible way to offer the best possible service without over gatekeeping the process, without actually guarding people off that legitimately need the care, but also kind of just keeping at bay the people that really should take a second look at the possibility that they think they're trans. Now, I do also believe in personal responsibility, so if one of these people does realize later that, well, I made a mistake, well, you're going to have to live with the consequences. If you realize later that this is not the way you should have gone, then you should have to live with the consequences of potentially starting hormones. I already know for myself, you can't really see it in the video, but I am already a very firm B cup. And unless I might lose some, but if I ever decide to detransition, that's going to be something I'm just going to have to live with for the rest of my life. Having boobs is going to be a consequence, and that's why like, for example, with informed consent, the doctors make sure that you very well understand on those forms what you are getting yourself into. What are you changing about your body? Now, for me, I don't believe I made a mistake. I'm 10 months in, and I am more happy with who I am and what I'm becoming than ever before. I have dealt with gender dysphoria since I was 4 years old, and this is the best decision I could have possibly made for myself. And I believe anybody who has been in the circumstances such as me should have that opportunity. It further perpetuates as a problem today. Things that happen today, like the fact, like I brought up, children who are given blockers at a young age who really should not be receiving them that young, or young kids who get hormones. Like, for example, like here, we have the show on TLC, I Am Jazz. I actually really do not like that show. It just furthers these ideas that of what we do for transgender care, when in fact it is probably the furthest from the truth it could ever be, and it just further hurts. Yeah, it makes some people aware of transgender issues and allows for some acceptance and understanding, but really, it just hurts the whole situation because it paints this narrative that's not true about people that legit, and I don't want to say that to, you know, delegitimize Jazz. She, you know, I don't know her personally. I can't judge her. She might legitimately have gender dysphoria. I also haven't really watched enough episodes to make that opinion, but it's not a picture that really needs to be painted of us in the light that that show does, not to mention it's meant for drama, which is a problem. The other thing is that we have this whole thing about basically letting the person, when especially comes to a child, we have the affirmative care that basically lets the kids call the actions. Like, there was of videos I've seen online where they were talking about parents who were questioning their kids' legitimacy of their gender identity, and then they were shut up and told they couldn't do that. And if your kid wants to transition, you have to let them. And if you stop them at home from identifying the way they do, we're going to take your kid away from you, which has been a legit thing that has happened, which I disagree with and I think is damaging and painful. And one of the things that a lot of people who have been transphobic towards me have based their opinions of my support of transgender people on, well, you support them and, you know, and because they're doing these things, that just makes it all wrong. Now, where, I'm going to try to sum this up really quick. Where did it go wrong? Why is it that we have gender clinics that you can just send a 10-year-old to, and just like that, they start them on hormones, they start them on blockers, they do whatever? Well, it really all started with John Money. And probably a lot of you, there's probably some of you that cringed when you heard that, and there's, well, let's just hope that there's a lot of you that actually cringed when you heard that name. So, as a lot of people should know, transgenderism is not a new thing. It goes out throughout human history, and that right there is my proof that it is a legitimate concern. It is something that legitimately needs addressing. Is people like me, people, I do believe gender dysphoria is truly something that needs addressing, and people like me truly need a cure, truly needs a fix. However, people like John Money set back transgender care by decades, at least. And the reason I say that is because this guy was a complete hack. He came on the scene after we had research that started happening in the early 1900s into gender, and it was decided that gender and sex were two different things. Kind of shaky, in my opinion, but I see where the research was what it was. However, the problem was he came on the scene and he had these theories, and a lot of them based around society, and that the fact that a child could be born and that their gender was strictly controlled by their environmental situations. And the problem is that he came up with this idea that you could take a boy, raise him as a girl, and he would not know the difference. And that's why a lot of people like to point to probably one of his biggest failures that had ever happened in his so-called career. And that was David Reimer, who got raised as Brenda. He was born during, I believe, if I can remember the details correctly, he had lost his penis in a circumcision accident. John Money recommended the complete castration of the penis and forming, basically doing reassignment surgery on the child and the parents to raise him as Brenda. However, in his teens, he finally found out when his parents confessed to him what they had done. He transitioned back to being a boy, but then committed suicide in his teens. A lot of people today like to point to that story as proof that transgenderism does not, that affirmative care does not work, and that it's actually in fact dangerous. However, I do not believe that to be the case. I actually, in reverse, believe that it should be a case for affirmative care, because it's basically a case for, well, society can't change who you are. Society can't change who you were born as. And for me, I can understand exact example. Why do you think the suicide rate for transgender people is 40%? It's because society tries to force transgender people back into a box, to force them back into their birth sex, what they were assigned at birth. And in the case of this little boy, he was born without gender dysphoria. He was born as a normal boy. There was nothing wrong with him. He could have grown up and become a perfectly normal man, if not for this hack. So what ended up happening is when he was forced to become a girl, he basically experienced the reverse of gender dysphoria. He would have experienced the same kind of gender dysphoria that a girl who feels like she's a boy in a girl's body would have felt. I use that term very loosely because I don't exactly believe that's how it works. So it is really, that's what I think. I think it is a case for that we do need affirmative care. That people like me would be like him, just in the reverse gender, into the reverse role. So John Money's research went on, and we can basically, some of you know, that is where WPATH comes from today. WPATH based a lot of their research on John Money's research. And that's one of the reasons why WPATH is probably one of the most messed up transgender care establishments to exist today. And they are actually, they're supposedly affirming care does not help majority of the trans community. While they do have a lot of gatekeeping, a lot of the gatekeeping they have set as guidelines is ignored. I mean, for example, informed consent is not a WPATH idea. WPATH completely disagrees with the informed consent route. They believe in therapy and all this other crazy stuff that really ultimately just is damaging to people who really do legitimately need help with particular kind of issues. And one of the reasons I'd say it's set it back decades is because we are finally seeing some of this stuff be kind of taken a new route. We have people that are coming up with new theories about it, better ways to treat transgender people. One of those people that I actually follow their protocol for myself, and it has been the best possible way for me to go about my treatment, even though my doctor personally is not following the WPATH method. She follows the, my trans clinic actually follows the, I'm blanking on the name, it's the San Francisco one, which is probably the better of the two. And then because she doesn't really have as much of a hands-on experience as I wish she did, I have a lot of kind of control myself, a lot of decisions I have made myself while still working within the legal realm. Anyways, getting beyond the scope of this video, and so the other person I'm just going to momentarily mention is Hughes, I believe his last name was. He is another hack who came shortly after John Money, who in the, I don't know, what was that, like the 70s and 80s, was pioneering SRS surgeries. He had a lot of people that he did the same thing to. He changed a lot of people's sexes who really just had other issues, not gender dysphoria, and would mess with genitals. And in the end, he ended up with people who completely flipped and messed up the evaluations of how effective SRS surgeries really were. And what's even more crazy is there was some good stuff that came out of what he pioneered. However, he flipped himself. He went and followed up with a lot of these patients, found things that he thought was crazy and was not proof that it did not work, and then flipped himself and then now wrote a bunch of papers and a bunch of things disproving transgender affirmative care. And now everybody also wants to point to all that new research and say, well, see, it doesn't work. So yeah, that's kind of where we all went wrong. And that's probably about as much as I can say. I would love to probably get into more of the more recent stuff that has messed it up. And, oh my gosh. I could get into a lot of stuff that's messed up today. Christians who like to point at all this stuff claim that it gives them the right to their bigotry. There's just people that do not accept their kids as actually being transgender. I said it before. Plenty of transgender people who have very poor treatment by their family, friends, and especially parents, because they're basing it on these lies and these hacks that came out throughout the last 100 years that really set back transgender care. And now people like me are fighting a battle that should have never been fought in the first place. Again, there's a lot of people who should not need the care that I receive. But people like me do need this. So that is an argument for not shutting down these programs completely, shutting them down altogether. We need just to evaluate and look at everything, take a step back and reconsider the scene. Anyways, I hope that made sense, and we're about at 15 minutes, which hopefully I'm trying to keep these short. I'm such a ranter. I know I am such a ranter, and I really hate it when I do this. So anyways, I will check you out later. Is that a good way to end the video? Anyways, don't forget to check out the social media, subscribe to my channel. I'm hoping to talk more about stuff like this in the future. And I will see you later. Bye.